More. I knew you from someplace else. That was it. I was at the show. That was fun. I usually have one dominant theme in the sermon, and whether you get it or not, it's really your fault. But I want to just pose this one question, and it will govern the entire sermon. What difference does it make in your life that you are a Christian? And that's it, okay? The Sermon on the Plain is Luke's condensed version of the Sermon on the Mount. It's about 1/4 the length. And every word in the Sermon on the Plain is important. It's distilled nectar that spews forth in verse 35. For God is gracious, generous, and kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. And I was thinking this week, that covers just about all of us, don't you think? So Luke begins with the Beatitudes. He says, "Blessed are the poor, for yours is the kingdom of God." Now, how many of you know what the kingdom of God, how to define it? You don't have to, because it is where God rules. Clarence Jordan translates kingdom of God as God's movement because it is spiritual at its core. You enter the kingdom of God, or it enters you through your heart. And it encompasses everything in this life and in this world. Your mind, your body, your spirit, your soul, your money, food, earth, health, politics, relationships, community. It covers everything. Because the first principle of the kingdom of God is it includes everything. In the kingdom of God, the fall of every sparrow is a significant event. Everything is joined together in the kingdom of God and to everyone else that is in it. But of all the translations of the kingdom of God, the one I like the best is from Diana Eck. She translates kingdom of God as household of God. I like that because it captures the essence of ecumenism, that the whole inhabited earth is God's house. Now, folks, what if we believed that? What if we lived into that? That God has called us to keep God's house. That we are to be faithful caretakers and caregivers in the house of God. And that everything and everyone is connected is implied in the Sermon on the Plain with its first set of parallel blessings and woes. Or I'd like to translate it, blessings and warnings. Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Warnings to those who are rich. You've already received your reward. Blessed are you who are hungry now, for you will be filled. Warnings to all of you who are filled, because one day you will know hunger. Blessed are you who weep now, but one day you will laugh. Warnings to all of us who are happy. Just make sure you understand, one day you will know sorrow. Blessed are the poor and the hungry and the sorrowful. God is on your side. God is at work for you. But warnings to all of us who are rich and full and happy. Warnings to all of us who are oblivious to the rest of the household of God in this world. The poor and the hungry and the sorrowful. Your time will come. You will not escape this life without experiencing poverty and hunger and sorrow. How foolish to think such a way. There was a young man training to run in the Special Olympics. He spent months training. In his excitement, he tripped at the starting line and fell. And all of the other competitors, each as eager as he to compete, nevertheless stopped running, went back, and picked him up. They lifted him up, and they all walked arm in arm across the finish line. And this story reminds me of my niece Abby. who swims in the Special Olympics. It also reminds me of how Jesus viewed God. He viewed God as the good shepherd who cannot rest as long as one lost sheep is out there, despite all of the 99 being where they're supposed to be. God is like the king who holds a banquet but will not serve dinner until every seat at the table is filled. What would our world look like if we lived according to this one rule, that nobody wins until we all do? What would our world look like? Our God is generous and kind, and God expects us to live into that generosity and into that kindness in our world. Here's the question: what difference does it make in your life that you are a Christian? Could it be active goodwill toward our enemies? Here is Jesus' most difficult saying. It's not in Buddhism, it's not in Islam, it's not in Judaism. Love your enemies. Aren't we glad this isn't in the church constitution? I mean, who would want to join Dover Church if that's in our Constitution, right? Gandhi said this about the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount should revolutionize the whole of life, but Christians tend to praise it instead of practicing it. He's right, isn't he? For Jesus, love of enemy, it's more than non-retaliation. It's more than resisting the urge to strangle our enemies. It is active goodwill toward our enemies. It's do good to them, bless them, pray for them. Confession time. Did someone pop into your head when I mentioned enemies and strangling them? Okay, did your stomach tighten and begin to twist? Well, here's a piece of advice. Say a prayer for them. This week, say a prayer for them, even if you don't mean it. If there is something to praise about them, praise them. Do some secret nice thing for them, but don't tell them because that'll ruin everything. But it can't hurt. And it might begin to dissolve the stone that is your heart. Active goodwill toward our enemies helps us become daughters and sons of God. We begin to reflect the character of God, who is kind and generous. So let's spread the word. Let's be emissaries to that kind of God in our world. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Or in the words of Wendell Berry, do to those downstream that you would want those upstream to do to you. Again, the question, what difference in your life does being a Christian make? Could it be this nagging notion to lend to others whether we think they can repay or not? Banks are everywhere in Westlake, right? And money is certainly the currency of the kingdom of God. It is certainly part of God's generosity and kindness. Did you know that in 2006, the Nobel Prize was awarded to a bank? It's a remarkable parable of the kingdom of God. In 1974, a young economics professor was teaching at a university in Bangladesh, and he heard about a woman who was borrowing money, about $1 from a moneylender. The interest on the loan was the moneylender would have the privilege of buying all that she produced at a price that the moneylender determined. And the young professor realized this was equal to slavery. So he made a list of all of the victims in the village who borrowed money from the moneylender, 42 people. And he decided he was going to pay off the loans. $27 from his pocket. Small gesture, right? But he saw the benefits to people who were freed from the economic enslavement they were experiencing. So he began to look for other people to help, and he turned to the banks to help him help the poor. What do you think the bank said? The poor are not creditworthy, right? So he decided to become the guarantor of all of the loans of the poor. The results were stunning. The poor made their payments every time on time. Later he said, we need to start a separate bank for the poor. So in 1983, he founded the Village Bank. And at his Nobel address, he reported, the Village Bank has now given out loans to nearly 7 million people, 99% of whom are women, in 73,000 villages in Bangladesh. Housing loans have been used to construct 640,000 houses. The Village Bank has given loans to poor people totaling nearly $7 billion. Significant stats, right? You want to hear the most important? 58% of those who borrowed money have now crossed the poverty line. And Jesus said, the kingdom of God is like the Village Bank. Again, the question, one last time, what difference does it make in your life that you are a Christian? Could it be that we have to relearn this whole idea about judging? Jesus said in the Sermon on the Plain, do not judge lest you be judged. Except I spend a whole lot of time and energy judging other people, yes, but also judging myself as well. And when I say judging, I'm not talking about the discernments and evaluations we need to live healthily and wisely and productively. No, when I talk about judging, I'm talking about that aroma of judgmentalism. I'm talking about the stench of judgmentalism that we continue to breathe in and out, maiming one another with our judgments toward each other and toward ourselves. How we bash each other and ourselves. And we don't even realize it's all connected. Because the judgment that we mete out toward other people is connected to the judgment we have received in this life. And we don't even realize that we have become slaves to this idolatry of perfectionism.